In the quiet neighborhood of Westbridge, a man named Ethan Ward lived a simple life. Ethan was known by most people as the Royal Guard, although the title sounded far grander than his real duties. Years ago, he had served as part of an American honor team that attended foreign ceremonies where leaders met for cultural exchange. It was mostly symbolic work, standing straight, wearing a crisp uniform, guiding guests through formal entrances, and making sure everyone followed the schedule. Ethan took pride in it because it allowed him to meet people from different countries and experience moments he never imagined when he was growing up in a small hometown. After retiring, Ethan tried to settle into normal life. He worked part-time at a community center, taught kids basic fitness, and helped seniors with light exercise. People liked him because he listened more than he talked, and he always greeted them with a calm smile. But even though he lived quietly, there was something about him that people sensed, an air of someone who had seen important moments, even if he never bragged about them. One calm spring morning, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with a cup of warm tea. He turned on the television to catch the news. A political talk show was running, and a familiar name appeared on the screen, Senator J.D. Vance. This version of J.D. Vance, the fictional one in our story, had become a rising figure in national politics. Many people admired him for his strong speeches and confident personality. Ethan had met him once many years earlier during one of those state events abroad. It was brief, just a short exchange in a hallway, but Ethan remembered the moment clearly because it was part of a very busy week. As Ethan watched, the senator began discussing his past international visits. He mentioned a royal ceremony he attended long ago and spoke about it with passion, describing how it shaped his view of leadership. At first, Ethan smiled. It was interesting to hear someone speak about an event he himself had witnessed. But then something unusual caught his attention. J.D. Vance described the ceremony differently from how Ethan remembered it. The senator's version placed himself at the center of a thoughtful diplomatic moment, while Ethan recalled it being much more ordinary and simple. At first, Ethan thought it was just a politician telling a story in a dramatic way. People did that all the time. But as the speech continued, J.D. Vance spoke about specific details, the timing of the ceremony, the people present, and the way the schedule had been rearranged at the last minute. Ethan blinked in surprise because the schedule had not been changed in the way the senator described. These were small things, but they felt strange, like listening to someone describe your own memory but placing different pieces in different places. Still, Ethan let it go. People often remembered things differently, especially when many years had passed. Maybe the senator simply recalled the event from another angle. Maybe he was mixing two events together. Ethan turned off the TV and continued with his day. But later that week, a neighbor visited him at the community center with her tablet. "Ethan, look at this," she said, showing him a clip of the same speech. "Isn't this the event you went to?" Ethan watched again, this time noticing more comments from viewers online who were fascinated by the senator's story. Some even said it showed how brave and steady he was during international situations. Ethan knew the ceremony had been peaceful, predictable, even routine. It was never intense or dramatic. He didn't want anyone to misunderstand the event or believe something unusual had happened. Ethan still tried to stay quiet about it, but as days passed, more people approached him. A reporter from a small local paper sent him an email asking for confirmation of certain details. Ethan didn't respond because he didn't want to enter the political spotlight. He valued his privacy deeply. The idea of being mixed into public debate made him uncomfortable. He liked the life he had, a simple schedule, friendly faces, peaceful evenings. He didn't want any change, but the more attention the senator's speech received, the more questions appeared. Not harmful questions, just curious ones. People wanted to know if the ceremony had really unfolded the way J.D. Vance described. Some suggested that Ethan, being there at the time, might have useful memories. One afternoon, as Ethan walked home from the grocery store, he found an envelope at his door. It came from a law office representing a group interested in preserving the historical accuracy of diplomatic events. They politely asked if Ethan would be willing to clarify his account, not in a dramatic way, but as a matter of record. They emphasized that the situation was not about accusing anyone of wrongdoing, only about making sure history remained precise. Ethan held the letter for a long time. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on him. He had always believed that facts should be truthful, but he also didn't want to cause conflict. He lay awake that night thinking about the young people he taught at the community center. He always told them to stand up for what was right, even when it was uncomfortable. The next morning, after much thought, he called the office and agreed to give a simple statement. He spoke calmly, explaining the ceremony as he remembered it. He insisted that he wasn't trying to comment on the senator or judge him. He simply wanted the record to reflect what actually happened. He thought that would be the end of it. But the statement, once filed, became public. And because J.D. Vance was a well-known political figure in this fictional world, even small disagreements about past events quickly turned into big discussions. Some people began comparing the two accounts, his and Ethan's, and asking why they differed. A few days later, a national newspaper reached out to Ethan. He politely declined interviews, but the attention didn't fade. Instead, more people began sending messages, wanting clarification. Ethan felt a mix of worry and responsibility. He didn't want confusion to grow, but he also didn't want to create drama. Things continued to grow unexpectedly. Some online commentators misunderstood his statement and exaggerated its meaning. Others assumed he was making a claim he never intended. He never accused anyone of bad behavior. He simply described the ceremony as quietly and honestly as he could. But in a world where public interest spread quickly and stories changed shape as people retold them, the situation slowly built pressure from every side. Ethan finally realized something important. Staying silent now might create more confusion. If small misunderstandings kept growing, they could turn into rumors, and rumors were the last thing he wanted. So he decided to step forward clearly, not to fight, not to blame, but to calmly protect the truth of the event he witnessed. That decision would become the moment that set everything else in motion. The news about Ethan's simple statement traveled farther than he ever expected. He had imagined that only a few people, the ones who cared about historical details, would read it. But because the fictional Senator J.D. Vance was a well-known figure in the country, anything connected to him attracted attention. Soon, Ethan's name was mentioned across local newspapers, small radio programs, and online discussions where people shared their opinions freely. At first, Ethan tried to ignore all of it. He continued showing up at the community center, teaching the kids stretching exercises and helping the seniors walk their daily laps. But he noticed small changes. Some people greeted him with extra curiosity. Others asked polite but pointed questions like, "Did you really attend that ceremony?" Or, "Is it true you remember it differently?" Ethan always gave the same gentle answer. "I only shared what I remembered." But the questions didn't stop. They grew, and with them came letters, emails, and phone calls. Not all unpleasant, but overwhelming in their number. Many people believed Ethan simply had a different perspective. Others speculated wildly, guessing things Ethan had never said. He felt as though his calm life was being pulled into a tide of public interest he never asked for. Things escalated when the senator's office released a friendly statement saying they respected Ethan's service, but stood by the senator's own memory. They explained that people often view the same event differently, and they encouraged everyone to remain respectful. The tone was polite, but the public read it in different ways. Some thought the statement supported Ethan. Others thought it questioned him, and still others thought it meant there was more to the story. The next morning, a TV truck parked near Ethan's street. A reporter knocked on his door, smiling kindly, and asked if he'd like to share his full experience. Ethan politely declined. He wasn't trying to become the center of anything. He simply wanted the story of the ceremony to be remembered as it truly happened. Peaceful, orderly, and without dramatic events. But the public curiosity didn't fade. In fact, it grew stronger. A group of supporters reached out to him, saying they wanted to help him defend his truth. Ethan thanked them but told them he didn't need defending. No one had done anything wrong as far as he was concerned. He knew that two people could remember the same event in different ways, and that didn't mean either of them had bad intentions. He hoped everyone would settle down soon. Then came a letter from a large organization that specialized in maintaining accurate records of international events. They explained that because the senator's speech had become widely discussed, they wanted to verify details from multiple witnesses. They asked Ethan to share everything he remembered, not for drama, but for historical accuracy. They also mentioned that the senator's version of events, if recorded as official history, might change the way future students learned about that ceremony. Ethan sighed when he read it. He didn't like the idea of being pulled deeper into the matter, but he also cared greatly about truth, especially in historical records. After thinking carefully, he agreed to meet with the organization, privately, quietly, and without any reporters present. During the meeting, Ethan calmly explained the timeline of the ceremony. He described how the officials moved from one room to another, how the schedule stayed the same throughout the day, and how the guests interacted. He spoke slowly, wanting to be precise. He made it clear that his intention was not to argue with anyone, but simply to share what he personally witnessed. The organization thanked him and assured him they would include his account neutrally, without adding unnecessary speculation. Ethan felt relieved, hoping that this clarity would finally calm the situation. But the opposite happened. Once the organization confirmed that Ethan's description differed in key areas from the senator's speech, the public grew even more curious. People wanted to know why two accounts didn't match. Some imagined dramatic explanations. Others formed theories that were far more complicated than reality. Then, one small online news blog wrote a headline that said, "Ethan's account challenged the senator's version." The word challenged made everything sound bigger and more confrontational than it truly was. Larger news platforms picked up the story, repeating the word again and again until it sounded like Ethan had stepped into a major dispute, which was not what he intended. When Ethan saw the articles, he shook his head slowly. He wished he could talk to every reader one by one and calmly explain that he was not challenging anyone. He was only sharing a memory from a long time ago. A week later, Ethan received an unexpected letter from a law firm representing the fictional senator. The letter was polite and warm in tone. It said they understood Ethan's perspective, but wanted to ensure that nothing presented publicly suggested wrongdoing by the senator. They asked Ethan to meet with their team so they could clarify any misunderstandings. Ethan agreed because he respected fairness and honesty. When he met with the senator's team, he found them friendly and professional. They told him they appreciated his service and respected his version of the story. They explained that the senator simply recalled the event differently because many years had passed. They also made a small request. Would Ethan consider signing a short statement confirming that he was not accusing the senator of any misbehavior and that his account was only about historical accuracy? Ethan smiled. "Of course," he said. "I've never accused anyone of anything." He gladly signed the document, thinking it would help settle everything. But when the document became public, many people misunderstood its purpose. Some thought it meant Ethan had been pressured. Others believed the senator felt threatened by Ethan's account. A few even claimed Ethan was preparing for a major legal step, though he had no such plans. In only a few weeks, the simple matter of clarifying a ceremony had turned into a national conversation filled with guesses, comments, and opinions, most of which had little to do with what Ethan actually said. Then a new twist arrived. A journalist discovered an old travel log from the time of the ceremony. It showed that the senator had changed his schedule briefly during the event. The change wasn't dramatic, it was just a small adjustment. But because the senator had not mentioned this part in his recent speech, people began asking even more questions. The public wondered if the small schedule change explained why his memory differed from Ethan's. The sudden discovery made the story grow again. The journalist reached out to Ethan, asking if he remembered anything about the schedule adjustment. Ethan told the truth. He remembered a small delay, but nothing unusual or important. The delay had been due to weather, not because of anything related to the senator. Still, the article made it seem like this detail created a deeper mystery. Readers shared it widely. Online discussions lit up with theories. Some people were simply curious, others confused, and some just enjoyed guessing. Ethan began to feel exhausted. Every time he went outside, people recognized him. Not in an unpleasant way, but in a way that made him uncomfortable, like he had become a character in a story he didn't control. Even the kids at the community center asked him questions. One little boy said, "Mr. Ethan, are you in a movie?" Ethan laughed gently and said, "No, I'm just in real life, and real life sometimes gets loud." But the inside of him felt heavy. He had always lived a life where things were simple and predictable. Now everything felt tangled. Even though the story had no harm, no anger, and no wrongdoing, its size kept growing like a balloon filled with too much air. Ethan realized that the situation wasn't going to fade unless he took a clear step to explain his position, fully and openly. But what step that would be, he didn't know yet. He only knew one thing. He wanted calm, clarity, and truth. And he hoped the world would eventually listen without turning his words into something bigger than they were. Ethan never imagined that giving one honest statement about a simple ceremony would echo across the country for weeks. But by the time part 3 of this unfolding situation began, he could feel how deeply people had become invested in the story. The peaceful life he once enjoyed now felt far away, replaced by a wave of questions, interviews, and speculation that seemed to grow a little each day. Still, Ethan tried to stay calm. He believed in patience, quiet thought, and steady decisions. And one day, after speaking with a group of community volunteers, he realized he needed to take a new step, one that would bring clarity and peace, not only to himself, but to everyone who kept asking for answers. He reached out to the same historical organization that had taken his statement earlier. He asked if they could help him do something simple, collect information from others who were also present at the ceremony years ago. Ethan was not looking for conflict. He wasn't trying to prove someone wrong. He only wanted neutral voices, people who might help show that memories can differ without anyone having bad intentions. The organization agreed. They reached out to several former staff members, assistants, event planners, and attendants who had been involved in the ceremony. Most replied politely and agreed to share their memories. All they asked was that their names remain private, since they didn't want to become part of the public conversation. Soon, Ethan sat in a small conference room with a soft carpet, quiet lighting, and a pot of warm tea on the table. One by one, different people arrived to share their recollections. Some remembered the day clearly. Others could only recall a few small details, but all of them described the event as calm and orderly. A few mentioned minor changes in schedule, like the brief weather delay Ethan had already confirmed. But nothing unusual stood out. Ethan felt relieved hearing their words. He hoped that gathering these gentle, consistent accounts would finally help the public understand that there was no mystery, no hidden twist, just normal differences in memory. But before the organization could release their summary, something unexpected happened. A journalist, eager for new angles, learned that several former event staff had been contacted. Without knowing the full context, the journalist wrote an article suggesting that a quiet internal review was taking place. The article didn't claim anything harmful, but the tone made it sound as if something secretive or serious was about to be discovered. The headline read, "Multiple witnesses speak up about old ceremony. What are they saying?" Ethan sighed when he saw it. The article was full of guesses and dramatic phrasing, even though the real story was simple. But once the article spread online, people began sharing their own interpretations again. The discussions grew louder. Some believed the new witnesses would confirm Ethan's account. Others believed the witnesses might recall the senator's version, and many believed there was something important yet to be revealed, even though nothing of the sort existed. It wasn't long before the senator's fictional office reached out again. They weren't upset. They simply wanted to know what kind of review was taking place. Ethan explained everything calmly. He had requested neutral accounts, not because of conflict, but because he wanted truth to stay simple. To his relief, they understood and appreciated his clarity, but the public did not see the calm conversations happening behind the scenes. They only saw the headlines and small pieces of information scattered across social media. Then, one afternoon, Ethan received a visit from a man named Daniel Fisher, a former event planner who had worked closely with many international teams. Daniel explained that he had been part of the same ceremony, although he had not interacted with Ethan or the senator directly. Daniel said he had kept personal notes during the event, mostly scheduling information, guest lists, and small reminders. Ethan listened carefully as Daniel explained why he had come. He had heard about the recent confusion through the news, and he wanted to help. He believed his notes might offer a clear picture of how the ceremony unfolded, especially regarding timing and order of events. Ethan thanked him warmly. Daniel placed a small leather-bound notebook on the table. Inside, the pages were filled with simple handwriting. Nothing dramatic, just details. What time guests walked in, when speeches began, how long each portion lasted, when the weather delay occurred. To Ethan, the notebook was reassuring. It matched his memory almost exactly, confirming that the ceremony had been smooth and predictable. But when Daniel mentioned this notebook to a reporter during a casual conversation, without realizing the effect it would have, the news spread rapidly. A headline soon appeared online. "New evidence found in ceremony dispute." Ethan read the headline and closed his eyes for a moment. Evidence was such a strong word. It made everything sound legal, heavy, and confrontational. Nothing like the gentle intention Daniel had. Within hours, people online speculated that the notebook held secret information or surprising discoveries. No matter how many times Ethan clarified that the notebook only contained routine notes, people continued to build their own theories. The confusion grew so large that the historical organization suggested holding a small public meeting, a calm one, more like a friendly discussion, where Ethan, Daniel, and a few others could speak openly, not to argue, but to explain the simple truth. Ethan agreed, hoping it would finally bring peace. On the day of the meeting, the room filled quickly, not with angry people, but with curious ones. Local residents, students, volunteers, and retirees who simply wanted clarity. Cameras weren't allowed inside, which made the atmosphere much gentler. The walls were lined with soft posters about cultural events, and sunlight filtered in through large windows, giving the room a peaceful glow. Ethan spoke first. He described the ceremony just as he always had. Calm, ordinary, respectful. He explained again that he never accused anyone of anything. He repeated that memories differ naturally, especially after many years. Then Daniel stepped up and explained his notebook. He said it contained nothing surprising, only practical notes. He smiled softly as he said, "I didn't come here to reveal anything. I came because I thought clarity might help bring quiet back into the world." The audience listened carefully. Some nodded. Some asked gentle questions. There was no tension, just simple curiosity. But later that evening, when the summary of the meeting reached the public, It created a strange effect. Many people appreciated the clarity, but others interpreted the cooperation between Ethan, the witnesses, and the event planner as a sign that something larger was being prepared, even though that wasn't the case. A few commentators online suggested that Ethan might soon speak in court as part of a bigger conversation about historical accuracy. Others believed he might request official corrections in public records, and some simply believed he was standing up for truth in a world filled with misunderstanding. Ethan felt a mixture of gratitude and weariness. He appreciated that people cared, but he wished they would see the quiet reality instead of imagining something dramatic behind every detail. It was around this time that Ethan began to recognize something important. The story had moved far beyond his control. The public had shaped it into something larger, something symbolic. People saw Ethan as a voice of honesty, not because of conflict, but because he stayed calm, gentle, and steady even as the situation grew complicated. He didn't want to be a symbol, but he understood that sometimes life chooses people for certain roles even when they don't seek them. As he prepared for the days ahead, Ethan knew one thing clearly. He needed to stay honest, stay kind, and stay peaceful. The world might spin stories in all directions, but he would remain the quiet center of truth, hoping that eventually people would understand that sometimes a simple memory is just a simple memory, and nothing more. When part 4 of the story began, the situation around Ethan had become much bigger than he ever wanted. What started as a small difference in memory between two people had now grown into a national conversation, but even with all the attention, there was still no anger, no harshness, just a cloud of curiosity floating above everything. People wanted answers, even when the answers were simple and quiet. But the more people asked questions, the more others searched for meaning where none existed. Every small comment was examined deeply. Every sentence was discussed online. And even though Ethan always spoke calmly, some people interpreted his peaceful honesty as something powerful, almost like a force in itself. The fictional senator's team also felt the pressure. They had no conflict with Ethan, but they knew the public was watching closely. They wanted to make sure everything remained respectful and true. So one morning they invited Ethan to attend a friendly meeting, open to the public but gentle in tone. The purpose was simple: to put everyone at ease by showing that there was no disagreement between Ethan and the senator, only different memories of an event from long ago. Ethan agreed. He believed that talking calmly in front of people might finally help settle the situation. The event took place in a large community hall decorated with soft lights, wooden chairs, and a stage with potted plants on each side. The room felt warm and welcoming. People filed in quietly, like they were coming to listen to a thoughtful conversation, not a debate. Everyone wanted to understand the truth, but they also hoped to see harmony between the two figures at the center of the story. Ethan sat in a chair on stage next to a representative from the senator's office, a polite and gentle woman named Clara Hartwell. Clara smiled kindly at Ethan and thanked him publicly for his honesty and calmness throughout the situation. She explained that the senator respected Ethan's service and appreciated that he had come forward with his memories. The audience listened closely, leaning forward in their seats. They seemed relieved that the tone of the meeting was peaceful. When Ethan spoke, his voice was steady. He talked about the ceremony again, how the day had been smooth, how the weather delay was minor, and how the schedule had followed its planned path. He repeated, as he always did, that he was not accusing anyone of making a mistake. He simply remembered the events from his point of view. Clara then spoke about the fictional senator. She said he respected Ethan and believed in open dialogue. She explained that people often remember things differently, especially after many years. She also reminded the audience that the senator had attended many international visits in his career, and sometimes small details from one event could blend with another in memory. The audience nodded. People murmured words like, "That makes sense," and "memories can change." Both sides expressed understanding. The atmosphere in the room felt calm, almost graceful, as if everything was finally settling. But outside the hall, reporters gathered. They couldn't hear every detail, so some of them guessed what was happening inside. When small pieces of information left the building, shared by attendees or posted on social media, the reporters tried to fill in the gaps, and in doing so, they sometimes added colors and shades that weren't truly there. A headline later that day read, "Ethan and Senator's team discuss different memories at public forum. Crowd reacts strongly." The article mentioned that the audience leaned forward, whispered to each other, and looked curious. But those were normal reactions during any thoughtful conversation. Still, the headline made it sound like something significant or emotional had happened. Ethan sighed gently when he saw the article. Even when things were calm, the world still tended to add dramatic shadows where none existed. Meanwhile, Clara thanked Ethan again privately and told him she was grateful for his fairness. She promised that the senator appreciated his willingness to help bring clarity to everyone. Ethan told her he hoped this meeting would bring peace. For a moment, it seemed like it might. But then something new stirred the public conversation again. A group of university students studying media and communication decided to analyze the difference in memories between Ethan and the fictional senator for a school project. They meant no harm. They simply wanted to explore how memory works and how public stories evolve over time. They interviewed people from the audience, gathered reports, and studied old travel logs. When they presented their findings at an academic conference, someone recorded a short clip of their presentation and shared it online. The clip was harmless, but it included one sentence that many people misunderstood. A student said, "Even small differences in memory can have large effects when the public pays attention." People took the sentence out of context, thinking the students had discovered something deeper or more important. Even though the students were only speaking generally, the clip spread across social media quickly. Many viewers assumed the students had uncovered something new about the ceremony, which they had not. Soon, a new wave of curiosity swept over the situation. People wondered again if something meaningful was hidden behind the simple differences in memory. Ethan felt tired, not physically, but emotionally. He never asked for this attention. He never wanted his quiet voice to become a center point of national discussions. But every time the story began to slow down, something else, small or accidental, pushed it forward again. He started receiving letters from young people who admired his calmness. Mothers wrote to him saying they used his story to teach their children about honesty. Teachers asked if they could share his experience with students to show how misunderstanding can grow when people jump to conclusions. Ethan felt humbled. He never thought his quiet nature could inspire anyone. And although the attention felt heavy, he also felt responsible to stay steady. If people were learning from this experience, he wanted them to learn the right lesson, that truth does not need loudness, and calmness can be powerful. The fictional senator's team also felt the rise in public curiosity again. They didn't want things to grow confusing. So they reached out to Ethan one more time and suggested something thoughtful. A joint statement, a simple one, something both sides could sign and share with the public to show that there was no disagreement, no hidden story, no conflict, just two honest memories, years apart. Ethan agreed. He wanted clarity more than anything. Together, he and the senator's team crafted a gentle message. It said the following: that differences in memory are natural, that both accounts were shared with honesty, that the ceremony had been peaceful and ordinary, that no misunderstanding should be turned into drama, and that both parties respected each other. The statement was released publicly. Most people accepted it warmly. They thanked Ethan and the senator's team for their transparency. They appreciated the calm, human tone of the message, and for the first time in weeks, the public conversation began to settle. The story softened, losing its sharp edges. People moved on to new topics. Ethan hoped this would finally bring the peace he longed for, but deep down, he sensed one final ripple might appear before everything truly quieted. And he was right. Because the story had become larger than him, larger than the fictional senator, even a simple message could not fully stop the momentum of public curiosity. Something was coming next, something not dramatic, not harmful, but important. The kind of moment that changes how a story ends. When the joint statement between Ethan and the fictional senator's team was released, many people expected the story to end quietly. And for a few days, it almost did. The online discussions slowed down. The news channels moved on to other topics. People in the community center greeted Ethan with warm smiles instead of curious questions. For the first time in weeks, Ethan was able to walk through his neighborhood without anyone stopping him for clarification or conversation. He felt thankful for the calm. But despite the peace settling around him, Ethan sensed something lingering, like a gentle echo that hadn't faded yet. Maybe it was because people had become so invested in the story. Maybe it was because the story had turned into something symbolic, or maybe it was because humans naturally seek closure, even when the truth is simple. A week later, Ethan received a soft knock at his door. When he opened it, he found a young woman standing on his porch. She introduced herself as Mira Dawson, a filmmaker working on a small documentary titled The Nature of Memory. She explained that her project wasn't about politics or public figures. It was about how ordinary people remember past events differently, and how those differences shape relationships and understanding. Mira said she hoped Ethan would share a short interview for the documentary. Not about the senator, not about conflict, but about memory itself. Ethan hesitated at first, remembering how quickly things could be misunderstood. But Mira assured him gently that the documentary would focus only on the human side of memory, how people grow, learn, forget, and reinterpret moments with time. After thinking for a moment, Ethan agreed. He believed in the value of helping others understand that memory was not a perfect recording. It was a living part of each person's experience. During the interview, Ethan sat with Mira in his living room. Sunlight warmed the floor and the quiet hum of the neighborhood filled the background. Mira asked him simple questions. How he remembered the ceremony, how he felt about the attention, how he stayed calm during the whole situation. Ethan answered thoughtfully. He talked about how memories were like paintings. Some parts stayed sharp and bright, while others softened with age. He explained that two people could look at the same moment but remember it differently, not because one was wrong, but because both saw the world from different angles. He shared how important it was to listen to others' memories with patience and kindness. Mira smiled as she listened. She told Ethan that she wished more public discussions happened with the same gentleness he showed. Ethan simply nodded, grateful for the quiet moment. The interview lasted only an hour, but it became one of the most meaningful conversations Ethan had experienced since the story began. After Mira left, Ethan felt lighter, as if he had finally expressed something deeper than dates, times, and schedules. He had shared the heart of the matter, that truth can exist in different forms without causing harm. 2 months later, when Mira's documentary was released online, something surprising happened. The film reached far more people than she expected. Viewers from all over the country watched it. Many said the part featuring Ethan touched them deeply. They admired his calmness, his honesty, and his gentle understanding of memory. They said his words helped them reflect on their own families, friendships, and old disagreements shaped by different memories. Suddenly, Ethan's story changed shape again, but this time in a peaceful and uplifting way. He began receiving letters not of confusion, but of gratitude. People wrote to him saying things like, "You helped me understand my father's memories. You made me realize my sister and I weren't arguing, just remembering differently. I want to thank you for showing that disagreements can be gentle. One letter came from a teacher who said she used Ethan's interview to teach her students about empathy. Another came from a group of college students who said they now looked at historical debates differently. A few letters even came from older adults who said Ethan's words helped them forgive someone they had misremembered for years. Ethan read each letter slowly, touched by the kindness. He placed them in a wooden box near his bookshelf, not to show off, but to remind himself that even a quiet voice could make a positive difference. Meanwhile, the fictional senator's team also reached out again, but this time with warm appreciation. They said the documentary helped explain the situation in a soft, human way that people understood. They thanked Ethan for being steady and thoughtful throughout the entire experience. They told him the senator respected the peaceful outcome and wished him well. For Ethan, this message meant a lot. It made him feel as if the last remaining threads of misunderstanding had finally been tied gently into place. Life slowly returned to normal. Ethan's days filled once again with simple joys, guiding children through stretching exercises at the community center, chatting with neighbors about gardening, reading books in the park, and taking long walks at sunset. No one asked him confusing questions anymore. No one sent reporters to his door. The world around him softened again into the peaceful rhythm he had always loved, but something inside Ethan had changed, not in a heavy way, but in a thoughtful one. He realized how powerful honesty could be. He realized how easily stories could grow beyond their original shape, and he realized that sometimes the simplest truths take the longest time to be understood. A year after everything began, Ethan received an invitation from a local college. They asked him to speak at a small event about the value of memory and honest dialogue. The invitation felt surprising, almost unbelievable. Ethan wasn't a public speaker. He wasn't a scholar. He was just a quiet man who wanted to share a simple memory, but he accepted. When he stood on the small stage at the college, he looked nervous at first. The room was filled with students, teachers, and community members who had come to hear him speak. But when Ethan began talking, his voice grew warm and steady. He told them the story, not in a dramatic way, but in a soft, reflective one. He spoke about how memories shape people. He explained how the story had grown much larger than he ever expected, not because of conflict, but because people wanted meaning. He encouraged everyone to listen deeply, especially when someone else's memory differed from their own. He finished by saying, "Sometimes peace isn't in proving who is right. Sometimes peace is in understanding that we all carry different pieces of the same moment." The audience gave him a gentle applause, not loud or explosive, but heartfelt. After the event, several students approached him to say thank you. One said his words helped her feel better about a misunderstanding with her best friend. Another said Ethan inspired him to study psychology. Several told him they appreciated his calm presence. Ethan walked home that evening under a quiet sky filled with stars. He felt peaceful, deeply peaceful. The story that had once felt heavy now felt like a circle completed, a journey from confusion to clarity, from misunderstanding to understanding, from noise to quiet reflection. He never sought attention. He never asked to become a voice in a national conversation. But life had placed him in that position, and he had done his best to stay true, gentle, and clear. As he reached his front door, he took a deep breath of the cool night air. The world had returned to stillness, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt that every part of the story, every misunderstanding, every conversation, every quiet truth, had led him to something meaningful. Not fame, not conflict, not victory, but wisdom. And as he stepped inside his calm, quiet home, he knew the story was finally complete.